Diplomatic negotiations for the end of the Ukrainian war are entering a new phase, as President Zelensky strongly opposed the U.S. side ceasefire proposal. The scheduled meeting of foreign ministers of the U.S., Ukraine, and Europe was abruptly postponed.
According to foreign news agencies such as AFP and Sky News on the 23rd, the U.S. Ukraine-European foreign ministers meeting, scheduled to be held in London, England on that day, has been downgraded to a working-level meeting and has effectively been postponed. The British Foreign Office officially announced that the ministerial-level meeting has been postponed, and the working-level meeting will continue. But the atmosphere of diplomatic conflict has become unavoidable. The meeting was scheduled to be attended by U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio, Special Envoy for the Middle East, Steve Witkoff, and the foreign ministers of Ukraine, the UK, France, and Germany. However, Secretary Rubio did not attend, and it is reported that Keith Kellogg, President Trump's special envoy for Ukraine, will take his place. It is still uncertain whether Special Envoy Witkoff will attend. Instead, British Foreign Secretary David Lammy will hold a separate bilateral meeting with Ukrainian Foreign Minister Andriy Sybiha, who has already arrived in London. The background to the sudden deterioration of the talks is President Zelensky's strong opposition to the ceasefire proposal proposed by the United States. The Washington Post WP reported that the United States will propose recognizing Crimea as Russian territory and freezing the current front line at this meeting. In addition, the New York Times NYT reported that at the Paris meeting on the 17th, the United States conveyed to the European side a plan to exclude Ukraine from joining NATO and recognize Russian sovereignty over Crimea. In response, President Zelensky held an emergency press conference on the evening of the 22nd and expressed a strong stance. He firmly stated that Ukraine will never recognize Russia's occupation of Crimea, and that this is against the Constitution. Meanwhile, the Financial Times FT reported that Russian President Putin proposed to the United States to stop further occupation of Ukrainian territory based on the current front line. This is interpreted as suggesting the possibility of forming a kind of ceasefire line. However, President Zelensky finds it difficult to accept all of these proposals, as they are fatal to Ukraine's territorial sovereignty and security. The New York Times said, the postponement of the talks is a double blow that casts doubt on diplomatic efforts to end the war in Ukraine. And the reduction of the U.S. negotiating team appears to be a symbolic retreat from European attempts at mediation. The BBC also analyzed, diplomatic efforts are active, but their direction and outcome remain unclear.
The positions of the various countries surrounding the diplomatic solution to the Ukraine war are becoming clearer. The negotiating table has been set up, but there is still no agreement in sight that can be put on it.